My name is Amber Mitchell and I'm 28 years old. For 11 years I carried the weight of guilt for an accident that paralyzed my sister Madison. My parents made sure I never forgot my supposed responsibility. Every family dinner, every holiday, every milestone was overshadowed by what happened that summer day. But last year I discovered a document that changed everything, the real police report that proved I wasn't to blame after all. Before I share how I discovered the truth that changed everything, let me know where you're watching from in the comments. And don't forget to subscribe for more stories of family secrets revealed. Growing up in the suburbs of Boston, the Mitchells appeared to be the picture-perfect American family. Our two-story colonial house with the white picket fence on Maple Street was always featured in the neighborhood's summer garden tour, thanks to my mother Rachel's impeccable landscaping skills. My father Thomas was a successful financial advisor at a firm downtown, while my mother balanced her part-time job as an elementary school art teacher with maintaining our household. When I was born, my parents were overjoyed to have their first daughter. Family videos show them doting on me, documenting my first steps, first words, and first day of kindergarten with the enthusiasm only new parents can muster. But when Madison arrived 2 years later, something shifted. It wasn't obvious at first, but looking back I can see how the dynamics changed. Madison was the bubbly, outgoing child who charmed everyone she met. With her honey blonde curls and bright blue eyes, traits she inherited from our mother, she was often mistaken for a child model or actress. Your daughter should be in commercials. Strangers would gush to my mother at the grocery store or mall. I, on the other hand, inherited my father's more reserved demeanor and mousy brown hair. I wasn't unattractive, just ordinary in comparison. As young children, Madison and I were inseparable. We built blanket forts in the living room, created elaborate backyard games involving our collection of stuffed animals, and defended each other fiercely on the playground. There's a photo of us at ages 5 and 3, dressed in matching overalls, holding hands as we fed ducks at the Boston Public Garden. That picture sat on our fireplace mantel for years. "Amber, watch out for your little sister," became my parents' constant refrain. I took the responsibility seriously, proudly guiding Madison through the routines of childhood. I taught her how to tie her shoes, ride a bike, and navigate the politics of elementary school friendships. The subtle favoritism began around the time Madison started first grade. When I brought home straight A's on my report card, my father would nod approvingly and say, "Good job, Amber." But when Madison brought home B's and C's with a single A in art class, there would be elaborate celebrations, ice cream outings, and effusive praise about her artistic talent. "Madison just processes information differently," my mother would explain. "We need to encourage her strengths." My achievements seemed expected rather than exceptional. When I won the 5th grade science fair with a project on water filtration, my parents attended the ceremony but left early because Madison had a dance recital the same evening. "You understand, right? Amber, you're the mature one," my mother said as they rushed out, leaving me to get a ride home with my teacher. As we entered our teen years, the gap between us widened. I channeled my energy into academics and the school newspaper, finding solace in writing and learning. Madison became a social butterfly, making the cheerleading squad as a freshman something unheard of at our high school. Weekends at our house became a revolving door of Madison's friends coming and going, giggling girls taking over the basement while I retreated to the quiet of my bedroom. The summer I turned 16, I got my driver's license and a part-time job at the local library. I was saving for college, determined to attend a prestigious university far from Boston. My dream schools were Northwestern and UCLA, as far from New England as I could reasonably justify to my parents. "I don't understand why you want to go so far away," my mother said one evening as I researched scholarship opportunities. "There are perfectly good schools right here in Massachusetts." Madison, 14 at the time, lounged across the couch texting her friends. "She just wants to get away from us," she said without looking up, probably embarrassed by her totally uncool family. I ignored the comment, but my mother frowned at me as if I'd been the one to say something hurtful. That pattern repeated itself constantly. Madison could make cutting remarks that went unchallenged, but if I defended myself, I was being too sensitive or picking on my little sister. The last happy family memory I have is from Easter 2012, 3 months before the accident. We attended church, took family photos in the backyard among the spring flowers, and had dinner with my grandparents. Madison was on her best behavior that day, helping in the kitchen and complimenting my grandmother's homemade rolls. After dinner we played board games, and for a few hours it felt like we were truly enjoying each other's company. I remember laughing at my father's terrible Pictionary drawings and thinking maybe things weren't so bad after all. But as spring turned to summer, the tension between Madison and me grew. She had started high school that year and was already more popular than I had ever been. Boys called our house for her, girls wanted to be in her circle. At 17, I was focused on my upcoming senior year, finalizing my college applications and working extra shifts at the library. One particular incident stands out from June 2012. I had been accepted into a prestigious summer writing program at Boston University, a competitive workshop that would look excellent on my college applications. The acceptance letter arrived on a Thursday. My parents glanced at it over dinner. "That's nice, honey," my mother said, then immediately turned to Madison. "Tell us more about the cheerleading camp you want to attend." For the next 20 minutes, my parents discussed the expensive 2-week cheer camp that Madison was desperate to attend in California. By the end of dinner, they had agreed to pay the $3.00 for her to go. "But what about Amber's writing program?" my grandmother asked, visiting for the weekend. "Isn't that a wonderful opportunity?" My parents looked momentarily confused, as if they'd already forgotten about my news. "Oh, of course," my father said. "How much is that program, Amber?" "It's $800 for the 6 weeks, I replied quietly. "Well, we'll have to see if we can fit that in the budget," he responded, even though they had just committed to Madison's much more expensive camp without hesitation. I ended up working extra shifts to pay for half of my program. Madison's cheer camp was fully funded. These were the dynamics that defined our family in the weeks leading up to July 15, 2012, the day that would change everything. I was counting down the days until I could leave for college, dreaming of a fresh start away from the constant feeling of being second best. I had no idea that in less than a month, I would be cast in the role of the villain in my family's tragedy, a part I would play for the next 11 years of my life. July 15, 2012, started like many summer Sundays in New England, warm and humid, with the promise of becoming uncomfortably hot by midday. Our family had planned a day trip to Lake Winnipesaukee in New Hampshire, about a 2-hour drive from our home. It was a favorite spot where we'd been going since Madison and I were little. But this summer, we had only made it there once due to everyone's busy schedules. I woke up early around 7 a.m. to finish packing my beach bag with a new novel, sunscreen, and a towel. I was looking forward to finding a quiet spot under a tree where I could read undisturbed. As I was about to head downstairs for breakfast, I heard Madison's voice from my bedroom doorway. "Is that my blue swimsuit in your drawer?" she demanded, already rummaging through my carefully organized dresser. "No, Madison, mine is navy, yours is turquoise," I replied, trying to maintain patience. This was a common occurrence, Madison assuming I had taken her things without asking. "Well, I can't find mine anywhere and we look about the same size now," she said, pulling out my swimsuit and holding it against herself. "We're not the same size and I haven't touched your stuff. Have you checked the laundry room?" I took my swimsuit back from her hands and placed it in my beach bag. Madison rolled her eyes. "Mom said she put all the clean laundry away yesterday." "Then maybe you should look in your own disaster zone of a room instead of assuming I took it." This sparked a heated argument that brought our mother upstairs. As usual, she sided with Madison. "Amber, would it kill you to let your sister borrow your swimsuit just this once? You have 2 others I've seen you wear." "Those are from last summer. They don't fit anymore," I protested. "And why is it always me who has to share? Madison never loans me anything." "That's not true," Madison countered. "I let you borrow my silver hoop earrings for prom. After Mom made you, and you reminded me about it every day for a week afterward." Our mother sighed dramatically. "I don't understand why everything has to be a battle with you two. Amber, please just help your sister find her swimsuit so we can get on the road." I bit my tongue and followed them to Madison's room, where we eventually found her turquoise swimsuit wadded up in the corner underneath a pile of discarded outfits from the week before. Not even an apology from Madison for accusing me of taking it. By 9:30 a.m., our parents were loading the cooler and beach chairs into the trunk of our SUV. Madison was upstairs taking forever to get ready, probably texting her friends about their own summer plans. I was sitting on the front porch steps, ready to go and increasingly annoyed by the delay. My father approached me, car keys in hand. "Amber, your mother and I still need to finish packing the food and loading the kayak. Could you drive Madison to the lake now? She wants to meet up with the Sullivan girls at the South Beach before it gets crowded." I stared at him in disbelief. "You want me to drive all the way to the lake, then come back to get you guys?" No, we'll meet you there in about an hour. Madison's impatient to meet her friends and you're ready to go. It makes sense. So I'm supposed to be her chauffeur because she can't manage her time properly?" My father's expression hardened. "This isn't a debate, Amber. Your sister has plans, you have your license, and we need more time to get everything ready. Sometimes being part of a family means doing things for each other without complaining." I knew there was no point arguing further. This was yet another example of Madison's desires taking priority over mine. Reluctantly, I took the keys and called upstairs. "Madison, let's go." The first 20 minutes of our drive were silent except for the radio playing top 40 hits that Madison controlled. She texted continuously, occasionally giggling at something on her phone but not sharing what was so amusing. I focused on the road, seething with resentment. "The Sullivans said they're setting up near the lifeguard tower," Madison finally said. "Aiden might be coming too." Aiden Reynolds was a junior whom Madison had been flirting with for weeks. He was on the swim team and, according to Madison, had the most amazing ABS ever. "Great," I muttered, "so I'm driving you to your date while Mom and Dad have no idea." Madison glared at me. "It's not a date, it's a group hang, and Mom knows the Sullivans will be there." "Does she know Aiden will be there too?" "Why do you have to be such a killjoy all the time? This is why you don't have a boyfriend. You overthink everything and suck the fun out of life." Her words stung more than I wanted to admit. I had dated a few guys, but nothing serious, partly because I was focused on academics, and partly because I was painfully aware of how boys tended to lose interest in me once they met my vivacious younger sister. "Put your seatbelt on," I said, noticing she had unclicked it to adjust her position. "We're on backroads, relax." "I don't care, it's illegal to ride without a seatbelt." Madison made a show of slowly pulling the seatbelt across her body, then releasing it as soon as I looked back at the road. I caught the movement in my peripheral vision. "Seriously, Madison, are you 5 years old? You're not, Mom. Stop telling me what to do." About 45 minutes into our drive, I noticed the gas gauge was getting low. I pulled into a station just off Route 11, about 7 miles from the lake. "I need to get gas. We're almost on empty," I explained as I parked next to a pump. Madison unbuckled her seatbelt properly this time and opened her door. "I'm going to grab a drink. Want anything?" "No thanks, and please put your seatbelt back on when you get back in the car." She rolled her eyes and headed into the convenience store. As I filled the tank, I noticed Madison exit the store with a bottle of water, look at me, then pull out her phone. After a brief conversation, she walked over. "Megan says they're all at the South Beach already. It's only like a mile from here if I cut through the state park trail. I'm just going to walk." "What, no, get in the car. I'll drive you the rest of the way." Madison shook her head. "By the time you finish getting gas and we drive all the way around, they might move to a different spot. The trail is a shortcut." "Madison, that's ridiculous. It's way more than a mile and you don't even know the trail." "Megan sent me the map location. It's fine. Tell Mom and Dad I'll see them when they get there." Before I could protest further, she turned and started walking toward the tree line behind the gas station where a small trail disappeared into the woods. "Madison," I called after her, "this is stupid. Get back here." She raised her hand in a dismissive wave without turning around and disappeared down the path. I stood there, torn between chasing after her and finishing with the gas. My immediate instinct was to follow her, but I also knew how stubborn Madison could be. If I chased her, she'd just walk faster or hide somewhere along the trail to prove her point. I decided to finish getting gas, drive to the South Beach, and meet her there. I'd deal with her attitude then and make sure our parents knew about her reckless behavior. Little did I know that this decision to let my headstrong sister walk away would haunt me for the next 11 years of my life. I arrived at the South Beach 20 minutes later, having gotten slightly lost on the unfamiliar roads. I scanned the crowded shoreline for Madison or the Sullivan girls but didn't see them. After waiting 15 minutes, I began to worry and called Madison's phone. No answer. I was about to call my parents when my phone rang, a known number. "Hello? Is this Amber Mitchell?" a serious male voice asked. "Yes, who's this?" "This is Officer Bennett with the Alton Police Department. I'm calling about your sister, Madison Mitchell." My heart dropped to my stomach. "What happened? Is she okay?" "There's been an accident on North Shore Road. Your sister was hit by a vehicle while walking along the roadside. She's been transported to Lakes Region General Hospital. Can you meet us there?" The world seemed to stop spinning. I couldn't breathe. Hit by a car? But she was taking a trail through the state park. She was found on North Shore Road, about 3 miles from the South Beach area. "We need you to come to the hospital. Have you contacted your parents?" "No, they're on their way to the lake. I'll call them now." The next hour was a blur. The frantic call to my parents, the terrifying drive to the hospital, getting lost twice because I couldn't focus, the hospital waiting room where I paced alone for 20 minutes before my parents arrived. their faces masks of fear and confusion. When the doctor finally came to speak with us, his expression was grave. Madison has sustained a severe spinal cord injury. We've stabilized her, but she's being airlifted to Massachusetts General for emergency surgery. The impact fractured her piethal vertebra and caused significant compression of her spinal cord. I'm afraid there's a high probability of permanent paralysis from the waist down. My mother collapsed into my father's arms, sobbing uncontrollably. My father, usually so composed, had tears streaming down his face. And I stood there frozen, replaying those last moments at the gas station, Madison walking away, me letting her go. That was the moment everything changed, the moment our family fractured in ways that would take 11 years to even begin to heal. The next 72 hours were a nightmarish carousel of hospital corridors, waiting rooms, and brief, confusing updates from various medical professionals. Madison underwent 2 surgeries at Massachusetts General Hospital. The first was an emergency procedure to stabilize her spine and relieve pressure on her spinal cord. The second, performed the following day, involved fusion of several vertebrae with metal rods and screws. My parents barely acknowledged my presence during this time. They huddled together in the waiting room, whispering and occasionally glancing in my direction with expressions I couldn't quite decipher. I sat alone, several chairs away, alternating between mind-numbing fear for Madison and crushing guilt about our final interaction. On the third day, a neurosurgeon with tired eyes delivered the news we had been dreading. Madison had complete paralysis below her waist. While some sensation might return over time, she would never walk again. My mother wailed, my father wept silently. I stood there, tears streaming down my face, feeling like I was watching our family's tragedy unfold from behind a glass wall, present but somehow separate. It was later that same day when my parents first directly addressed their feelings toward me. Madison had been moved from intensive care to a regular room, heavily sedated but stable. The 3 of us were in the hospital cafeteria, picking at food none of us wanted to eat. "Why did you let her walk alone?" my mother asked suddenly, her voice low and strained. I looked up from my untouched sandwich. I tried to stop her. She wouldn't listen. "You're the older sister. You should have made her stay in the car," my father interjected, his tone harder than I'd ever heard it. "How? She just walked off. Was I supposed to physically drag her back?" My mother's eyes flashed with anger. "You should have followed her, called us immediately, done anything other than just let your 15-year-old sister wander off alone." She said she was taking a trail through the state park to the beach. "I didn't know she'd try to walk along the highway," I explained, my voice breaking. "You were responsible for her." My father slammed his hand on the table, causing nearby diners to turn and stare. "We trusted you to get her safely to the lake, and now she's paralyzed for life." The word paralyzed hung in the air like a physical presence. It was the first time any of us had said it aloud. "This is your fault," my mother whispered, her eyes filled with a hatred I never thought I'd see directed at me. "This is your fault." That moment marked the beginning of my new identity within our family, the one who had ruined Madison's life. Later that week, 2 police officers came to the hospital to take statements. They interviewed my parents first, then asked to speak with me alone in a small consultation room. "I understand this is difficult," Officer Rivera said, her tone professional but kind, "but we need your account of what happened before the accident." I recounted everything: the drive, the gas station, Madison's decision to walk to the beach. "Did you argue with your sister? Give her any reason to want to leave the vehicle?" Officer Rivera's partner, Detective Wilkins, asked. "No, not really. We bickered a bit in the car about her not wearing her seatbelt, but nothing serious. She said her friends were already at the beach and she wanted to take a shortcut through the state park trail." The officers exchanged glances. "The accident occurred on North Shore Road, about 3 miles from where you stopped for gas. That's not on any trail to the South Beach." This information confused me. "I don't understand. Why would she go that way?" "We're still investigating," Officer Rivera said. "The driver who hit your sister claimed she suddenly appeared on the road from an adjacent wooded area, possibly from a residential shortcut. He didn't have time to stop." "Is he being charged?" I asked. "The investigation is ongoing," Detective Wilkins replied noncommittally. "We'll be updating your family as we learn more." But no official report was ever shown to us, only verbal updates that became increasingly vague as weeks passed. The driver, we were told, was cooperating with police. There would be appropriate consequences, though these were never specified. By the time Madison was conscious and coherent enough to give her own statement, a different narrative had emerged, one that would shape our family dynamics for years to come. I was sitting alone with Madison for the first time since the accident. nearly 2 weeks after she was hospitalized. She was propped up in bed, her usually vibrant face pale and drawn, dark circles under her eyes. A large window overlooked the hospital's garden, filling the room with afternoon light that seemed incongruously cheerful. "The doctors say I'll never walk again," she said flatly, staring out the window. "Maddie, I'm so sorry," I whispered, using my childhood nickname for her. "I should have made you stay in the car." She turned to look at me, her expression hardening. "You didn't just let me walk away, Amber, you kicked me out of the car." I stared at her in shock. "What? No, I didn't. We were fighting about the seatbelt thing, and you pulled over and told me to get out if I couldn't follow your rules. You said you were sick of babysitting me." "That's not what happened. You chose to walk. You said your friends were waiting and you wanted to take a shortcut." Madison's eyes filled with tears. "Why are you lying? Haven't you done enough?" Before I could respond, our parents entered the room. Seeing Madison crying, they rushed to her side. "What did you say to her?" my father demanded. "Nothing. She's lying about what happened." "Enough, Amber," my mother hissed. "Haven't you hurt her enough? Get out." I looked from face to face my sister's tearful accusation, my parents' protective anger, and realized with a sickening clarity that this was now the official family version of events. No matter what I said, they had already decided I was guilty. Over the following weeks, as Madison began her grueling rehabilitation process, her story evolved further. In this new narrative, I had been jealous of her popularity, resentful of driving her to meet friends, and deliberately cruel in ejecting her from the car in an unfamiliar area. When I protested that none of this was true, my mother took me aside in the hospital corridor. "Madison's psychologist says this is how she remembers it," she explained in a clipped tone. "Trauma can affect memory, whether you want to admit what you did or not. What matters now is supporting your sister's recovery." "So I'm just supposed to accept being blamed for something I didn't do?" "What matters is what Madison needs to heal," my father interjected, having overheard our conversation. "And right now she needs not to deal with you calling her a liar on top of everything else she's suffering." My protests fell on deaf ears. Our extended family and friends soon learned the story from my parents' perspective. Amber had a fight with Madison and kicked her out of the car. Madison had no choice but to walk along the highway. A momentary lapse in judgment on my part had resulted in a lifetime of paralysis for my sister. At a family gathering during Madison's first weekend home from the hospital, my Aunt Patricia pulled me aside. "I always knew there was jealousy between you girls, but I never thought it would lead to something like this," she said, shaking her head in disappointment. "That's not what happened," I insisted, fighting back tears. My aunt patted my arm condescendingly. "Denial doesn't help anyone, dear. You need to take responsibility and make amends." One by one, relatives and family friends aligned themselves with the narrative that positioned Madison as the innocent victim and me as the villain. A few tried to remain neutral, suggesting that both girls share some responsibility, but even this felt like a betrayal when I knew the truth. My former best friend Jess initially stood by me, but after hearing Madison's tearful account at a small welcome home gathering, even she began to distance herself. "I want to believe you," she told me hesitantly, "but why would Madison lie about something so serious?" I had no answer that didn't sound like I was further vilifying my paralyzed sister, and so gradually I became isolated, the girl who had ruined her sister's life, the jealous older sibling, the one who couldn't be trusted. By the time my senior year of high school began that September, just 6 weeks after the accident, I had started to internalize the blame. Maybe if I had been more insistent that Madison stay in the car, maybe if I had followed her immediately, maybe if I hadn't argued about the seatbelt, maybe. The what-ifs became a constant refrain in my mind, drowning out any defense I might have mustered, and with each passing day, as I watched Madison struggle with her new reality, learning to use a wheelchair, adapting our home with ramps and modified furniture, enduring painful physical therapy sessions, my guilt grew, regardless of the actual truth of what had happened that day. The ground was laid for 11 years of emotional punishment, both from my family and, ultimately, from myself. My senior year of high school should have been filled with college applications, prom planning, and the bittersweet nostalgia of last moments with childhood friends. Instead, it became a daily exercise in navigating isolation and judgment. Teachers who had once praised my academic performance now regarded me with thinly veiled disapproval. Friends whispered when I entered classrooms. Madison's former cheerleading squad openly glared at me in the hallways. I stopped eating lunch in the cafeteria after overhearing a group of juniors discussing how I had basically tried to kill my sister because I was jealous of her. Instead, I spent lunch periods in the library, burying myself in books that offered temporary escape from my reality. My grades began to slip for the first time in my academic career. The straightest student became someone who struggled to maintain B's and C's. I couldn't concentrate. Insomnia plagued my nights, and during the day I moved through a fog of exhaustion and depression. "I'm concerned about your performance, Amber," my app English teacher said after class one day in October. "This isn't like you." I nodded numbly, unable to explain that nothing was like me anymore. The person I had been before July 15th no longer existed. At home, the atmosphere was suffocating. Our house had been modified to accommodate Madison's wheelchair. Doorways widened, a ramp installed at the front entrance, her bedroom moved to the first floor. These physical changes were necessary and appropriate. The emotional changes were what crushed me. My parents spoke to me only when absolutely necessary, their words clipped and cold. "Please pass the salt. Your turn to load the dishwasher. Don't leave your shoes in the hallway. Madison's chair can't get around them." When they did address the accident, it was always in terms of my failure and Madison's suffering. Madison's physical therapy was particularly painful today, my mother would announce at dinner, her eyes boring into mine, or my father would sigh heavily while reviewing medical bills, looking pointedly in my direction. The message was clear: every twinge of pain Madison felt, every adaptation our family had to make, every dollar spent on her care, all of it was my fault. Madison herself wielded her injury like a weapon. "I can't reach that shelf," she would say when I was nearby. "I guess I'll never be able to reach high shelves again." Or, "Remember when I used to be able to climb stairs? That was before the accident." Always the accident, never a direct accusation, but the implication was unmistakable. By December I had abandoned my dreams of attending Northwestern or UCLA. The carefully crafted application essays sat unfinished on my laptop. Instead, I applied to the state university 20 minutes from our home. "You're staying local for college?" my mother asked when she saw the acceptance letter in January, genuine surprise in her voice. "I thought it would be better," I mumbled, "to help with Madison." For the first time since the accident, I saw a flicker of approval in her eyes. "That's the right decision. Your father and I will need help with her care." And so my penance was established. I would sacrifice my own dreams to atone for what my family believed I had done. When graduation day arrived in June 2013, I walked across the stage to receive my diploma with no family members cheering from the audience. Madison had a doctor's appointment that my parents couldn't reschedule. "You understand," my father had said, "it wasn't a question." My college years became an extension of high school classes, part-time job, and caretaking duties for Madison. I lived at home to save money ostensibly for myself, but in reality, much of my earnings went toward household expenses and items for Madison that insurance wouldn't cover. I majored in paralegal studies rather than journalism, which had been my passion. More practical, my father approved. "You'll be able to get a steady job locally." Madison started at the same university a year after me, having graduated with her high school class despite missing the first months of her junior year. The administration made accommodations for her disability, then she quickly built a new social circle, gaining sympathy and admiration for her resilience in the face of tragedy. Whenever we encountered acquaintances who knew us both, Madison would introduce me with a pointed, "This is my sister Amber. She was driving the day of my accident." Not "she's majoring in paralegal studies" or "she works at the campus bookstore." My identity had been reduced to my connection to her injury. We attended the same campus for 3 years, that our college experiences couldn't have been more different. Madison joined accessible sports programs, disability advocacy groups, and even dated several guys who seemed genuinely attracted to her vibrant personality despite or sometimes because of her wheelchair. I existed on the periphery of college life, taking night classes to accommodate my work schedule, avoiding social events where I might be recognized as Madison's sister, and spending weekends helping my mother with Madison's laundry, meal prep, and household accommodation. During my junior year, I met Ryan in my constitutional law class. He was kind, intelligent, and knew nothing about my family history. For a few blissful months, I experienced what it might have been like to have a normal college relationship, study sessions that turned into dinner dates, weekend movies, inside jokes that made me laugh for the first time in years. Then came the inevitable meeting with my family. We had been dating for almost 4 months when Ryan suggested he should meet my parents. I had avoided the subject, making excuses about their busy schedules, but eventually ran out of plausible reasons to keep him away. The dinner was a disaster from the moment we arrived. My parents were coldly polite, asking cursory questions about Ryan's studies and family. Madison, however, dominated the conversation with detailed descriptions of her accident and recovery, repeatedly referring to how Amber kicked me out of the car and if only Amber had been more responsible. Ryan looked increasingly uncomfortable, shooting confused glances my way. I sat in silence, pushing food around my plate, unable to defend myself without seeming cruel to my disabled sister. After dinner in the privacy of his car, Ryan asked, "Is what Madison said true? You made her get out of the car on the highway?" "No," I replied, finally telling someone the full story of what had actually happened that day. "But that's what my family believes." "Why don't you set the record straight? It's been years and they're still punishing you for something you say you didn't do." "You don't understand. Madison is paralyzed for life. My parents need someone to blame. If it's not me, then it's just a random accident, and that's somehow worse for them." Ryan tried to be understanding, but the dynamic clearly disturbed him. Our relationship deteriorated over the following weeks as he witnessed more interactions between me and my family. After a particularly tense Sunday dinner where my father criticized my career choices and Madison made multiple references to how I had ruined her life, Ryan ended things. "I care about you, Amber," he said gently, "but you're trapped in a toxic situation that you're not willing to leave. I can't be part of this family dynamic." I couldn't even blame him. I would have left too if I could. By the time I graduated with my paralegal degree at 22, I had fully accepted my role as the family scapegoat. I found a job at a small law firm in Boston, specializing in personal injury cases, and irony not lost on me, the commute was manageable, the pay decent, and the work engaging enough to provide some escape from my personal situation. At 23, I finally moved out of my parents' house, renting a small apartment about 15 minutes from them. Even this modest step toward independence was met with resistance. "I don't understand why you need to move out," my mother complained. "We have plenty of space here, and it would be so much easier for helping with Madison." "I need some space of my own," I tried to explain. "I'll still come over to help." "Space from your responsibilities, you mean," my father muttered. Despite living separately, I still visited my family home at least twice a week, helping with Madison's needs and listening to my parents' subtle and not-so-subtle reminders of my culpability. Sunday dinners remained mandatory, an exercise in emotional endurance that left me drained for days afterward. I tried dating occasionally throughout my mid-20s, but relationships inevitably faltered when confronted with my family situation. Some men, like Ryan, were disturbed by the dynamic. Others simply couldn't understand why I maintained contact with people who treated me so poorly. "Why don't you just cut them off?" my colleague Jessica asked after witnessing a particularly nasty phone call from my mother. "You don't deserve to be treated this way." But how could I explain the complicated web of guilt, obligation, and lingering hope that kept me tethered to my family? Despite everything, they were still my family, and underneath it all, a small part of me still wondered if perhaps they were right, if I did deserve this punishment for not trying harder to stop Madison that day. By my 28th birthday in 2023, 11 years had passed since the accident. I had established myself professionally at the law firm, moving up from entry-level paralegal to senior paralegal with specialization in case research. I had a small circle of work friends, a comfortable apartment, and a routine that, while lonely, was at least predictable. Madison, now 26, had graduated college with a degree in communications and worked remotely as a social media manager for a disability advocacy nonprofit. She still lived with our parents, though she had become increasingly independent, driving an adapted vehicle and managing most of her daily needs herself. Our relationship remained strained, defined entirely by the accident and its aftermath. We never spoke about anything meaningful, never shared confidences or inside jokes as sisters normally might. She was the victim, I was the perpetrator. These roles had been cemented over 11 years and seemed permanent. But fate, it turned out, had other plans. The truth that had been buried for over a decade was about to resurface, upending everything we thought we knew about ourselves and each other. The catalyst for change came unexpectedly during a Sunday dinner in April 2023. These weekly gatherings had settled into a predictable pattern over the years: stilted conversation, passive-aggressive comments, and the consistent reinforcement of family mythology. I attended out of obligation rather than any expectation of enjoyment. That particular evening, Madison had news to share. As we picked at my mother's dry roast chicken and overcooked vegetables, she cleared her throat dramatically. "I have an announcement," she said, her face lighting up with excitement. "Brandon proposed last night. We're engaged." Brandon Miller had been Madison's boyfriend for nearly 2 years. He worked in it and seemed genuinely devoted to her, accommodating her disability without making it the center of their relationship, something I privately thought was good for her. My parents erupted in enthusiastic congratulations. My mother immediately began crying happy tears, while my father stood to embrace Madison, something I hadn't seen him do in years. "We're so happy for you, sweetheart," my mother gushed. "After everything you've been through, you deserve all the happiness in the world." Madison beamed, holding out her left hand to display a modest but elegant diamond ring. "We're thinking about a spring wedding next year, nothing too elaborate, but I'd like it to be special." "Whatever you want," my father assured her. "This is wonderful news." Throughout this exchange, I sat quietly, offering a smile and a brief congratulations when there was a pause. I was genuinely happy for Madison despite our troubled relationship. I never wished her ill, but I also recognized that I was, as usual, peripheral to the family celebration. As my parents peppered Madison with questions about wedding plans, Brandon, who had always been polite but somewhat reserved around me, unexpectedly addressed me directly. "Amber, Madison mentioned you might have connections through your law firm to help us find an accessible venue, something ADA-compliant but still elegant." Before I could respond, Madison raised her glass of sparkling cider for a toast to finding happiness despite what happened, she announced, her eyes briefly flicking toward me. "Despite what happened, I've found my happy ending." My parents raised their glasses with misty eyes. I mechanically lifted mine as well, but something inside me shifted at that moment. 11 years of accepting blame, of arranging my life around my supposed debt to Madison, of enduring constant reminders of my responsibility for her condition, and still, even in her moment of joy, she couldn't resist the pointed reference to the accident. The rest of the dinner passed in a blur. My parents and Madison discussed wedding details while I nodded at appropriate intervals, my mind elsewhere. After dessert, as I was helping clear the table, Brandon approached me in the kitchen. "Can I ask you something?" he said quietly, glancing toward the dining room where Madison and my parents were still chatting. "What really happened the day of Madison's accident?" I nearly dropped the plates I was carrying. "What do you mean?" "It's just, Madison's told me her version, but sometimes the details change. First it was that you were arguing about music, then it was about her friends, then about a swimsuit, and sometimes she says you made her get out on the highway, other times at a gas station." He looked uncomfortable but determined. "I love Madison, but I need to understand your family dynamic better if I'm going to be part of it." I stared at him, speechless. No one had ever questioned the official narrative so directly. I began, but was interrupted by Madison wheeling into the kitchen. "What are you two whispering about?" she asked, her tone light but her eyes suspicious. "Just asking Amber about potential venues," Brandon covered smoothly. As I drove home that night, Brandon's question echoed in my mind. What really happened? For 11 years I had accepted my family's version of events, even as I knew it wasn't accurate. I had allowed guilt to reshape my life, abandoned my dreams, and accepted emotional abuse as deserved punishment. But what if I could prove what actually happened that day? The thought took root and refused to let go. I was now a paralegal with research skills and some understanding of the legal system. I had connections at my firm that might help. Was it possible to find the official police report after all these years? The next morning, I arrived at work early and closed my office door. With slightly shaking hands, I searched our firm's database for information on requesting historical police reports in New Hampshire. The process seemed straightforward. Complete a right-to-know request form, submit it to the relevant police department, and pay a small fee for copies. But would it be that simple? After 11 years, would the report even exist? And if it did, was I prepared to learn what it contained? What if it confirmed that I was indeed responsible in some way I had blocked from my memory? These questions plagued me all day, making it difficult to focus on my work. By afternoon, I had made my decision. Even if the truth implicated me further, knowing would be better than living with uncertainty. That evening, I called my therapist, Dr. Sarah Jensen, whom I had been seeing sporadically for years to help manage my depression and anxiety. I hadn't mentioned my plan to anyone else, but I needed perspective before proceeding. "I'm thinking of requesting the police report from Madison's accident," I explained after outlining the events of the Sunday dinner. "After all these years, I need to know what it actually says." Dr. Jensen was silent for a moment. "That's a significant step, Amber. What are you hoping to find?" "The truth," I replied simply, "whatever it is." "And if the report confirms your family's version?" "Then at least I'll know. I can stop questioning my own memories." "And if it doesn't, if it supports your version of events?" This was harder to answer. "I don't know. I'm not looking to prove my family wrong or embarrass Madison. I just I need to know for myself. Dr. Jensen's voice was gentle but firm. I think seeking the truth is important for your healing process, but I want you to prepare yourself for all possible outcomes, including the possibility that the report might be inconclusive or even no longer available. I understand, I assured her. I'm ready for whatever I find. The next day, I submitted my request to the Alton Police Department. The form asked for my relationship to the case, and I hesitated before truthfully writing sister of victim. I included all the details I could remember: the date, location, names of the officers who had interviewed me, Madison's full name and date of birth. Then began the waiting. I was told it could take up to 30 days for the request to be processed, and each day felt like an eternity. I avoided Sunday dinner the following weekend, claiming a stomach bug. The weekend after that I reluctantly attended but remained distracted, answering questions about wedding venues in monosyllables while my mind continually returned to the pending report. At work, I threw myself into research for a complex personal injury case, partly to distract myself and partly because immersing myself in legal precedents and accident reconstructions felt oddly relevant to my personal situation. 3 weeks after submitting my request, I received a call from the Alton Police Department. Ms. Mitchell, this is Records Officer Diane Collins. I'm calling about your right to know request. My heart raced. Yes? We've located the file you requested. The report can be picked up at our office or mailed to you for an additional fee. I'll pay for the mailing, I said quickly, giving her my address and credit card information. 2 days later, a large manila envelope arrived at my apartment. I stared at it for nearly an hour before finding the courage to open it. Inside was a substantial file containing the official police report, witness statements, photographs of the accident scene, and medical first responder notes. With trembling hands, I spread the documents across my dining table and began to read. The truth I had sought for 11 years was finally before me, waiting to either condemn or exonerate me. I sat at my dining table, staring at the official police report with trembling hands. The room seemed too quiet, the air too still, as if the world was holding its breath along with me. Outside, rain began to fall, droplets battering against my window in a gentle rhythm that contrasted sharply with my racing heart. The first page contained basic information: date, time, location, responding officers. I skimmed it quickly, searching for the narrative section that would describe what actually happened. When I found it, I had to force myself to slow down and read carefully, not wanting to miss a single detail of the truth I had waited 11 years to learn. At approximately 12:37 p.m. on July 15, 2012, officers responded to reports of a pedestrian struck by a vehicle on North Shore Road, approximately 07 miles east of the intersection with Route 11. Upon arrival, officers found a female subject, later identified as Madison Mitchell Dobb, 10/17/1996, unconscious on the shoulder of the eastbound lane. The striking vehicle, a 2010 Honda Accord operated by Derek Lawson Dobb, 3/22/1985, was pulled over approximately 50 feet ahead of the victim. According to Mr. Lawson's statement, he was traveling eastbound at approximately 40 mph, posted limit 45 mph, when Ms. Mitchell suddenly appeared on the roadway from the adjacent wooded area. Mr. Lawson states he attempted to brake and swerve but was unable to avoid collision. Preliminary breathalyzer test administered on scene registered a BAC of 0.6, below the legal limit but indicating consumption of alcohol. Witness Janet Harmon, who was walking her dog on the opposite side of the road, confirms that the victim emerged from the wooded area onto the roadway while looking down at what appeared to be a mobile phone. Ms. Harmon states the victim did not appear to look for oncoming traffic before entering the roadway. I stopped reading, my hands shaking so badly that I had to put the paper down. Madison had walked out from the woods onto the road while texting. There was no mention of her being abandoned or kicked out of a car. The report directly contradicted the story she had told our family. Taking a deep breath, I continued reading, turning to the witness statements attached to the main report. Janet Harmon's detailed account describes seeing Madison step out from between trees while looking at her phone, then freeze when she noticed the car approaching. Another witness, a man who had been fishing nearby, stated he heard tires screeching followed by impact, but did not see the actual collision. Most revealing was a statement from Megan Sullivan, one of the friends Madison had been trying to meet that day. Madison texted me around noon saying she was walking to meet us at South Beach because her sister was taking too long getting gas. I told her it wasn't a good idea because it was pretty far, but she said she knew a shortcut through the woods that her boyfriend had shown her once. I told her to wait for her sister, but she said she was already walking and would be there soon. There it was confirmation that Madison had chosen to walk away, just as I had always maintained. She hadn't been abandoned or kicked out, she had made an impulsive decision that tragically resulted in her injury. I turned to the medical reports. The EMS had noted that Madison regained consciousness briefly in the ambulance and stated she had been walking to meet friends and took a shortcut through the woods. Again, no mention of being forced out of a vehicle. Most damning of all was a supplementary interview conducted with Madison a week after the accident. Once she was stable enough to provide a statement, the officer's notes included this passage. When asked about the events leading up to the accident, Ms. Mitchell stated she had been riding with her sister to meet friends at the lake. They stopped for gas, and she decided to walk the rest of the way because she was impatient and thought there was a trail through the woods that would be a shortcut. Ms. Mitchell acknowledges her sister advised against this plan, but she didn't listen and left anyway. Ms. Mitchell admits she became disoriented in the woods and was trying to find her way to the main road when the accident occurred. I read this section 3 times, hardly believing what I was seeing. Madison had initially told the truth. It was only later, after the surgeries, after the paralysis diagnosis, after our parents had already begun to blame me, that her story changed. The report contained one more critical piece of information. Derek Lawson, the driver who had hit Madison, had indeed had alcohol in his system, though below the legal limit. He had been returning from brunch with friends where he admitted to having 2 miasamas. Due to his borderline back and Madison's admission that she had entered the roadway without looking, he had received only a citation for failure to exercise due caution and was sentenced to 200 hours of community service. I sat back in my chair, overwhelmed by the implications of what I had discovered. For 11 years I had carried the weight of blame for an accident that the official record clearly showed was not my fault. Madison had lied first by omission, then directly, and our parents had accepted her version without question, without ever seeking the official report themselves. The rain outside had intensified, drumming against the windows as if demanding acknowledgement of the storm brewing within me as well. Anger, relief, vindication, and profound sadness swirled together in a maelstrom of emotion. 11 years of my life had been shaped by this lie: my education choices, my career path, my relationships, my sense of self-worth, all of it influenced by a false narrative I had eventually come to believe myself. I gathered the documents carefully, placing them back in the envelope with hands that had finally stopped shaking. The truth was clear, but what would I do with it? Confront my family, show Madison the evidence of her deception? The thought of the inevitable confrontation made my stomach clench. For nearly a week I carried the knowledge with me like a secret weapon, unsure when or how to deploy it. I avoided my family's calls, claiming a heavy workload that wasn't entirely untrue. I needed time to process, to decide on my next steps. Finally, I realized I needed to speak with Madison alone before approaching our parents. Despite everything, she was my sister, and I wanted to understand why she had maintained this lie for so long. I texted her on a Thursday evening, "Need to talk to you privately. Important. Can I come by tomorrow when Mom and Dad are at their dinner with the Hendersons?" Her reply came quickly, "Sure, everything okay?" "We'll explain tomorrow," I responded, unwilling to give her any warning about what was coming. The next evening I drove to my parents' house with the police report in my bag, my heart pounding so loudly I could hear it over the car radio. Madison answered the door, her wheelchair maneuvering smoothly over the threshold ramp our father had built years ago. "Hey," she said, a question in her eyes. "Mom and Dad just left. What's up?" I followed her into the living room, waiting until she had positioned her chair before taking a seat on the couch opposite her. For a moment, I simply looked at my sister, really looked at her for the first time in years. Behind the defensive posture and guarded expression was still the girl I had shared a childhood with, the sister I had once been close to. "I have something to show you," I said quietly, removing the envelope from my bag. "The official police report from your accident." Madison's face went pale, her eyes widening slightly before she controlled her expression. "Why would you dig that up after all this time?" "Because I needed to know the truth." I withdrew the report and held it out to her, "and now I do." She didn't take it. "I don't need to see that." "I think you do, because it doesn't match the story you've been telling for 11 years. Madison's eyes darted away, focusing on a point somewhere beyond my shoulder. "It was a long time ago. I was traumatized, in shock. The report includes your statement from the hospital, Madison, your initial statement, where you told the officers exactly what actually happened, that you chose to walk away from the car at the gas station, that I tried to stop you, that you got lost in the woods and wandered onto the highway while texting." Her hands gripped the arms of her wheelchair tightly, knuckles turning white. "You don't understand what it was like," she whispered, waking up in that hospital bed being told I'd never walk again. So you decided to blame me instead? Tears welled in her eyes. It wasn't planned. Mom and Dad were so devastated, so angry. They kept asking why I was walking alone, why you let me go. It was easier to let them think it was your fault than admit I did something so stupid. She wiped at her eyes. And then once I said it, I couldn't take it back. It became the story. The story that ruined my life, I said, my voice breaking. Do you have any idea what it's been like, carrying the blame for your paralysis for 11 years, being treated like a criminal in my own family? Madison's shoulders slumped, tears now flowing freely down her face. I'm sorry, she whispered. It just spiraled. At first I thought it would blow over, that Mom and Dad would stop being so angry eventually, but they didn't, and by then the lie was too big to take back. So you just let me suffer instead? Let me sacrifice my dreams, my relationships, my self-worth? I was scared, she cried, scared they'd blame me instead. Scared everyone would think I was stupid for walking into traffic while texting, scared of losing their sympathy, and then years passed and it just seemed impossible to tell the truth. I sat in silence, watching my sister cry. Part of me wanted to comfort her, a reflex from our childhood when I had always been the protector. A larger part was still raw with the pain of betrayal. What are you going to do? Madison finally asked, her voice small. Are you going to show Mom and Dad? Yes, I replied without hesitation. I'm done living with this lie, Madison. They deserve to know the truth, and so do you, so do I. She nodded slowly, resignation in her expression. When? Sunday dinner, I want you all there together. I stood up, tucking the report back into my bag. I think you should prepare yourself for that conversation. As I turned to leave, Madison called after me. Amber, wait. I paused but didn't turn around. For what it's worth, I am sorry, really sorry. I looked back at my sister, seeing both the woman who had caused me so much pain and the girl she had once been. I believe you, I said quietly, but that doesn't fix what happened. Driving home that night, I felt oddly calm. The conversation with Madison had gone more or less as I had expected, denial then anger then confession. What I hadn't anticipated was the profound sadness I felt for both of us. We had lost 11 years that could never be reclaimed. All because of a lie told by a frightened, injured teenager and perpetuated by parents too eager to assign blame. Sunday would bring the final confrontation, the moment when the foundation of our family mythology would crumble. I didn't know if anything could be rebuilt from those ruins, but I knew I could no longer live in a house constructed of lies. Sunday arrived with a clear blue sky that seemed mockingly cheerful given the storm I was about to unleash. I had barely slept the night before, rehearsing what I would say, anticipating reactions, and steeling myself for the confrontation ahead. The police report was securely in my bag as I drove to my parents' house. I had made copies, one set for them to keep, ensuring there could be no denial of the facts. My hands were steady on the steering wheel, my resolve firm despite the anxiety churning in my stomach. I arrived exactly at noon, the appointed time for our weekly family dinner. My mother answered the door, her usual cool greeting replaced by visible concern. You look terrible, she said, examining my face. Are you sleeping properly? Not really, I replied honestly. Is everyone here? Your father's carving the roast. Madison and Brandon are in the living room. I nodded, stepping past her into the house. Brandon's presence was unexpected but perhaps beneficial. An outside witness might make my parents less likely to dismiss the evidence outright. In the living room, Madison sat in her wheelchair, her face pale and drawn. She must not have been sleeping well either. Brandon stood behind her, one hand resting supportively on her shoulder. He nodded a greeting to me, his expression curious but wary. Dinner's ready, my father called from the dining room. Come while it's hot. We gathered around the table as we had countless Sundays before. My mother's roast beef, my father's precisely poured glasses of wine, Madison positioned at her usual spot where a chair had been removed to accommodate her wheelchair. Brandon sat beside her, and I took my place across from them, next to my father. The familiar ritual of passing dishes began. My father made his usual comments about the tenderness of the meat. My mother reminded everyone to take vegetables. The normality of it all felt surreal given what I was about to do. I waited until everyone had been served, then cleared my throat. I need to talk to all of you about something important. My father paused mid-bite, looking annoyed at the interruption of his meal. Can it wait until after dinner? No, I said firmly. It can't wait any longer. It's already waited 11 years. The table fell silent, my mother's fork hovered between her plate and mouth. Madison stared down at her untouched food. Brandon looked confused but attentive. I reached into my bag and pulled out the envelope containing the police report. I requested the official police report from Madison's accident. It arrived last week. My father's expression darkened. Why would you do that? What's the point of dredging up the past? Because I needed to know the truth, and now I do. I removed the documents from the envelope and placed them on the table. The police report contradicts the story this family has believed for 11 years. It contradicts the story that has defined my relationship with all of you since I was 17 years old. My mother's hand trembled slightly as she set down her fork. What are you talking about? According to the official investigation, witness statements, and Madison's own initial testimony, I did not kick her out of the car. I did not abandon her on the side of the road. She chose to walk away at the gas station despite my objections. She got lost in the woods trying to take a shortcut and wandered onto the highway while texting. The driver who hit her had alcohol in his system, though below the legal limit. My father's face had gone from dark to thunderous. This is absurd. Madison told us exactly what happened. Madison lied, I said bluntly, meeting my sister's eyes across the table, and she admitted it to me 2 days ago when I showed her this report. All eyes turned to Madison, who sat motionless, her gaze fixed on her plate. Madison, my mother prompted, her voice barely above a whisper, is this true? For a long moment, the only sound in the room was the ticking of the grandfather clock in the corner. Then Madison raised her head, tears streaming down her face. Yes, she said, the word barely audible. Amber's telling the truth. My father shook his head in disbelief. No, there must be some mistake. There's no mistake, Madison continued, her voice stronger now. I chose to walk away from the car that day. Amber tried to stop me, but I wouldn't listen. I thought I knew a shortcut through the woods, but I got lost. I was texting Megan for directions when I walked onto the road without looking. The driver couldn't stop in time. My mother's face had drained of color. But you told us Amber kicked you out of the car after an argument. You said she drove away and left you with no choice but to walk along the highway. I lied, Madison whispered. I was scared and in pain and wanted someone to blame. You and Dad were so angry, asking why I was walking alone, and it was easier to blame Amber than admit I'd done something so stupid. My father stood abruptly, his chair scraping loudly against the floor. He walked to the window and stood with his back to us, shoulders rigid with tension. Why didn't you tell us the truth later? My mother asked, her voice breaking. After you recovered? After you adjusted to your new life? Madison looked down again, shame evident in every line of her body. It had been the story for so long. Everyone believed it. I was afraid of what would happen if I admitted I'd lied, afraid you'd stop loving me. So instead I interjected quietly. You let me carry the blame for 11 years. You let me sacrifice my dreams, my self-respect, my relationships. You let me believe I was responsible for ruining your life. Brandon, who had been silent throughout this exchange, placed his hand over Madison's. You should have told me, he said softly. I would have helped you find a way to make it right. My father turned from the window, his face ashen. I need to see that report. I slid it across the table to him. He took it with shaking hands and began to read, my mother looking over his shoulder. The room fell silent again as they absorbed the truth that had been hidden from them for over a decade. When my father finally looked up, there were tears in his eyes, something I had seen only twice before in my life, at my grandfather's funeral and the day of Madison's accident. Amber, he began, his voice rough with emotion. I don't know what to say. You believed her without question, I said, my own tears threatening to fall. You never once considered my side of the story. You punished me for 11 years for something I didn't do. We were devastated, my mother said, as if that explained everything. Our youngest daughter was paralyzed. We needed to understand why. So you decided it was my fault. You made me believe it was my fault. My father sank back into his chair, the report still clutched in his hands. We were wrong, he admitted, the words seeming to physically pain him. We were terribly, unforgivably wrong. My mother began to sob, her shoulders shaking with the force of her grief. My father reached for her hand, his own tears now falling freely. Madison wheeled herself around the table to my side, Brandon following close behind. I'm so sorry, Amber, she said, reaching for my hand. I know it doesn't fix anything, but I am truly, deeply sorry for what I did to you. I looked at my sister's outstretched hand, then at my parents' broken expressions. The vindication I had expected to feel was overshadowed by a profound sadness for all we had lost. 11 years of genuine connection, 11 years of trust and love, 11 years we could never get back. I don't know if I can forgive you, I said honestly. Not yet, maybe not ever completely, but I'm glad the truth is finally out. The following weeks were difficult but necessary. My parents insisted on family therapy with a new counselor, one who hadn't been part of perpetuating the original lie. Dr. Renata Torres specialized in family trauma and reconciliation, and she didn't shy away from addressing the harm that had been done to me. "What you experienced, Amber, was a form of emotional abuse," she said during our second session. "Being blamed and punished for something you didn't do, especially by the people who should have protected you, is profoundly damaging." My father flinched at the word abuse, but didn't argue. My mother wept quietly. Madison, without the shield of her false narrative, seemed smaller somehow, more vulnerable. "And Madison," Dr. Torres continued, "while your initial lie is somewhat understandable given your age and traumatic circumstances, maintaining it for 11 years represents a significant moral failure that you need to take full responsibility for." Madison nodded, no longer making excuses for her actions. "I know," she whispered. "I know what I did was wrong." Progress was slow and painful. There were setbacks, moments when old patterns reasserted themselves, when resentments flared, when the weight of 11 years of deception seemed too heavy to overcome. But slowly, week by week, we began to rebuild on a foundation of truth rather than lies. My relationship with my parents required the most work. They had been the adults in the situation, the ones who should have sought all the facts before assigning blame. Their failure to protect me, to seek the truth, to question Madison's changing story, these were betrayals I struggled to move past. "I don't know if I can ever fully trust you again," I told them during a particularly difficult session. "Every time you unquestioningly took Madison's side, every time you made me feel guilty for pursuing my own life, every Sunday dinner where you reminded me of my supposed failure, it all damaged something fundamental between us." My father, a man who had rarely apologized for anything in his life, reached for my hand. "We failed you," he admitted, his voice breaking. "We failed as your parents, and no apology can ever be enough. But if you'll allow us, we want to try to make amends, not to erase what happened, but to be better going forward." My mother, who had been quieter throughout the process, finally spoke up. "I think I always knew, deep down, that something about Madison's story didn't add up, but acknowledging that would have meant facing the possibility that the accident was just that, an accident. That there was no one to blame, and somehow that felt more frightening than blaming you." It was the most honest thing she had ever said to me. 6 months after I revealed the truth, Madison's wedding day arrived. She had asked me to be her maid of honor, a request that had filled me with conflicting emotions. After much consideration and several sessions with Dr. Torres, I had agreed, not out of obligation but as a step toward healing. The ceremony was small but beautiful, held in a garden venue that was fully accessible for Madison's wheelchair. As I stood beside my sister watching her exchange vows with Brandon, I felt a complex mixture of emotions: lingering hurt, cautious hope, and a tentative rekindling of the sisterly love that had been buried beneath years of resentment. At the reception, Madison surprised me by asking Brandon to help her stand for a special toast. Using braces and Brandon's steady support, she rose shakily from her wheelchair, the result of years of physical therapy that had restored minimal movement and sensation in her legs. "I want to toast my sister, Amber," she said, her voice clear and strong, "who has shown me the true meaning of resilience and integrity. For 11 years I hid from the truth of my actions and their consequences. Amber had the courage to bring that truth to light. Not out of vengeance, but out of a need for healing. I don't deserve her forgiveness, but I'm grateful every day for the chance to rebuild our relationship on a foundation of honesty." Tears pricked my eyes as Madison continued. "My accident taught me that life can change in an instant. My recovery taught me that adaptation is possible. But Amber taught me the most important lesson of all, that without truth, there can be no genuine connection, no real love. To my sister Amber, thank you for not giving up on the truth or on me." 1 year after discovering the police report, our family gathered for Christmas at my parents' home. The dynamics were different now, more honest, more equal, still sometimes uncomfortable but no longer toxic. Madison and Brandon announced they were expecting their first child. My parents spoke of retirement plans. I shared news of a promotion at work and a budding relationship with Michael, a lawyer I had met through a colleague. As we sat around the tree exchanging gifts, I reflected on the journey of the past year. The truth had not magically healed all wounds or erased the lost years, but it had created space for something new to grow, something authentic and perhaps in time, even beautiful. Later, as I helped my mother in the kitchen, she paused while drying a dish. "Are you happy, Amber?" she asked, a question she had never thought to ask in all the years of blame and guilt. I considered it carefully. "I'm getting there," I answered truthfully. "I'm building a life that's mine, not defined by Madison's accident or by guilt. She nodded, her eyes bright with unhid tears. That's all I want for you now. That's all I should have wanted all along. The journey of forgiveness is not linear, and I still have days when anger resurfaces, when the weight of those lost 11 years feels overwhelming. But I've learned that forgiveness isn't about forgetting or excusing what happened. It's about refusing to let the past determine my future. It's about choosing to live fully in the truth rather than being imprisoned by lies. If there's one thing I want you to take from my story, it's this: truth, however painful, is essential for healing. Living with a lie, whether it's one you've told or one you've been told, is a kind of prison. Breaking free requires courage, but the alternative is a life built on shifting sand. The weight of false guilt is too heavy for anyone to carry indefinitely. If you're holding on to blame that doesn't belong to you, or if you're hiding a truth that needs to be spoken, I hope my story gives you the courage to seek or speak that truth. Families can be both our greatest source of support and our deepest wound. The Mitchells will never be the picture-perfect family we once pretended to be, but we're learning to be something perhaps more valuable, authentic, honest, and accountable to each other. As for me, I'm reclaiming the dreams and ambitions I set aside 11 years ago. I've applied to journalism school, my original passion before paralegal studies. Whether I'm accepted or not, the act of applying represents a promise to myself. From now on, I will live my life based on truth, not guilt. Have you ever had to confront a difficult truth in your own family? How did you handle it? I'd love to hear your stories in the comments below, and if you found value in my experience, please like this video, subscribe to this channel for more stories of healing and truth, and share with someone who might need to hear that it's never too late to break free from the weight of undeserved blame. Thank you for listening, and remember, your story isn't over yet. The truth, however long buried, has a way of rising to the surface when it's finally ready to be told.